How's it going, everybody? Welcome back for another episode of the Unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. I'm Zach Farmer, and we got a few things to kind of talk about. We had some international trips. We've had some injury updates, some very recent injury updates as of actually this morning as I'm recording this. And then also we're going to get a chance to talk with Khalil Shabazz from USF. It was great to be able to kind of sit down and talk with him. So we'll also get into that interview in a little bit. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the conference schedules and kind of analyze those a little bit, kind of see where the tough stretches are and that sort of thing. And we're going to start off though with some of the international trips, and more specifically, I think we're going to talk about the St. Mary's international trip to Australia. And this was a trip that most every team goes on their international trips, and I think a lot more of them were highlighted this past year because it's the first time since COVID teams have really gotten to kind of do this in full force. And so, again, St. Mary's went on its trip to Australia and was going to play some pretty legitimate competition while they were there. They played a couple of NBL teams, one of which was Melbourne United, which is the defending NBL champs. The NBL right now at the stage when St. Mary's was down there was at probably the beginning of their preseason slate and just kind of figuring things out and whatnot. And again, like a lot of St. Mary's grads, a lot of former St. Mary's players end up in the NBL, as do some other WCC talent. So this is a league that St. Mary's is obviously very familiar with, as well as players around the league are very familiar with. And St. Mary's went down there and went 6-0 on this trip. And regardless of the 6-0 start, the 6-0 trip, which I think is a minor component to what I was kind of looking for on this trip, was how did the new pieces fit? How did the new guys look? How did the guys who were coming back start to feel out maybe what their new roles might be? Obviously, there are some key losses on this team with Matthias Tass, Tommy Kuzi, and then also Dan Fotu leaving. So there was going to be some mixing and matching, and just trying to figure out what this team is going to look like and what the rotations might be when we get to November. And we got to see the start of some of that. We got to see this point guard rotation of Augustus Marciulionis and Aiden Mahaney at the point. We got to see Mitchell Saxon at the center position in bigger minutes than he had last year. We got to see Chris Howell and Lemmet Bachler show out and show what they can do. And honestly, those are the guys that really stood out to me. Yes, Alex Dukas had also a good trip where he was the high point man, I think a couple of different times on the trip. But you kind of expect that out of an Alex Dukas. We didn't see Logan Johnson for every single game, but you already know what Logan Johnson's going to give you. You know what Kyle Bowen is going to give you. It was the rest of the pieces you kind of wanted to see how this was going to shape out. And I'm going to start with Mitchell Saxon because we saw hints of it last year in the games against Gonzaga, in the games where they were playing teams with legitimate big men. Mitchell Saxon is going to be a defensive monster this coming year. And you could see it in just the way he moves his feet, the way he defends, the way he uses his body so well. And I think that's one of the things that has impressed me so far early on with Saxon has been his ability to move and shuffle and really being able to play solid defense. We saw, again, like we talked a little bit about that when against Gonzaga, when he was actually having to switch off and got switched on to Chet Holmgren. Holmgren was a guy who was able to blow by everybody, who was able to figure it out. But Saxon in the second game in Moraga was able to figure it out so much more and how to actually keep Holmgren in front of him. And I think that was really impressive. And we're starting to see those things translate to this year. And it's better than it was just a few months back. Again, like we're still in August and this was only back in March. he has improved a lot. It's in at least it looks like that right now. So I'm excited about what Mitchell Saxon is going to be able to kind of bring to this group. And then we can kind of go to Lemmet Bachler, who has been injured a good chunk of the last couple of years and has been off and on, kind of getting back into the rotation and that sort of thing. But the one thing we knew he could always do was shoot, and that's exactly what he did on this trip. He was really efficient from outside. I think he's going to be I think he could be a key cog off the bench for this team. Obviously, we kind of know that like the point guard, there's going to be rotation at the point guard position. Your 2 is Logan Johnson. Your 3 is Alex Dukas. So Lemmet Bachler is going to have to be kind of like that release valve for the second unit. And I think he's going to be that kind of the key component, the key scorer of that second unit, because he's going to be able to stretch the floor, maybe unlike some of the rest of the guys on that second team. So I think it's going to be really exciting to kind of see where he goes. Chris Howell also we got to see some really good, nice things from him. His athleticism, his energy. Again, Howell comes in as being as touted as being a really good defender. And we saw a bunch of that on this trip as well. And we saw the defense again from the St. Mary's team all the way around on this trip. And this is a team that has been in the top 15 KenPom rating for their defense the last 2 seasons. So this is not, and last year was not an aberration on how good this team is defensively. This team's identity has changed over the last 4 or 5 years, where now its identity has become a grit and grind defensive team. They may not have necessarily like the athletes of like a San Diego State or a team like that, but this is a team that still is going to compete at a really high level defensively and make you work for everything you get. And then that brings us to the point guards, Marshallonis and Mahaney. And I'm going to start with Marshallonis because he's the returner. He's the one coming back. And the one thing I noticed through the course of the Australia trip was his command of the offense. And I think that was one of the most important things to see the growth in. Last year, we saw from time to time, he made freshman errors, like he maybe rushed a little bit too much. He didn't quite have the feel for the offense at all times. And I think that was very evident, and you could see that early on. And again, like when you're talking about a freshman, you kind of expect some of these things to come up. But what you expect as they go into year 2 is that they start to clean up some of those mistakes and some of those difficulties and those challenges. And we started to see a little bit of that on this trip, where he looks much more confident in his decision making. He looks like the distributor I think many thought he could be and would be. So I think we're starting to kind of see some of that. But this isn't going to be a one point guard show, not like in many years past where we have seen either like the Emmett Nars or the Joe Rayhans or the Jordan Fords, or even last year with the Tommy Kuzis as being like one primary point guard. This is a team I think that's going to be splitting this time, because Aiden Mahaney has made an impression right away. He looks the part. He acts the part. He has a command of the offense already, or at least it seems like to me that he has a command of this offense. He is decisive. He attacks the basket. He from what we have seen thus far, he can create his own shot, and he is not going to hurt you on the defensive end. I think there's a lot to be excited about with Mahaney right now, and that's without him having played a single non-conference game or seeing what he can do against the competition he's going to see back over here in the States. And there was a lot of excitement, I think, over Mahaney. He was one of the best point guards, one of the best high school players in the state of California. Local kid. He went to Capolindo, just around the corner from St. Mary's. So I think looking at him, like we're starting to see some of the early returns of what he could be. And it's actually really exciting to kind of see, because this is a team, if you take a look at their schedule, has the opportunity to do something special, and having a point guard, two point guards who really can kind of like share this load and be the be kind of like a yin and yang of their styles. I think this is going to be really important to kind of like for this St. Mary's team kind of moving forward. And especially as they start to kind of like look at conference play and everything else, like obviously there'll be some growing pains, I think, still think with this point guard combination because they are both still young, and that is going to happen. But as we get closer to conference play, I think they're going to be far more confident and ready to go as we dive into there. And that kind of leads me into USF. This is a roster we know that has had a lot of turnover. There's only one of the starters returning from last season. You lose a guy like Jamari Bouye, and that is a huge blow. I think there's no way to underestimate the importance of Bouye from this USF team the last 5 years. And the one guy we know that is coming back, that is kind of like leading the charge, is Khalil Shabazz. And we know what he can do offensively. This is now his opportunity to kind of step into that leadership role and everything else. And so let's kind of like get into it and talk with him about what he's been doing this summer, a little bit about the Seattle program, as I kind of mentioned. I'm going to talk to him a little bit about that. We're not going to talk about the injury to Chet Holmgren, which was news as of this morning. This was recorded before we actually knew about the severity of the injury and everything else. So the conversation with Khalil is more about the atmosphere and everything else, and the importance of the Seattle program and the crossover and that sort of thing. So just keep that in mind as you're listening through the interview. That's like, we're not going to talk about injuries or anything like that. That's a topic for another day and everything else. All right. So with that, let's get into the interview with Khalil. All right. With that, we're going to bring in two-time All WCC second team member Khalil Shabazz. Khalil, thanks for taking the time to join me. How's your summer been, and how's it been going?
Oh no, first I just want to say thanks for having me, bro. Appreciate it. And yeah, man, the summer was good, bro. I stayed out here in San Francisco. I had a couple classes to finish up for my undergrad, a couple Spanish classes. So my Spanish is top tier right now. And got some good workouts in. I went back to Seattle for about a week when LeBron and them came up and stuff like that. So I got to experience that. So that was crazy. And yeah, man, I had a great summer. Can't complain.
So I wanted to kind of actually start with just this past weekend, with all of like the buzz that was happening around the Seattle Pro-Am, the crossover, and obviously you being from Seattle and being from up there, like how much, like just watching it on social and seeing just how all of like the energy and the excitement that was going on around it. And I know typically like there's always a lot of excitement around that Pro-Am in general, but having like the stars like LeBron and Jason Tatum go up there for this past weekend, just kind of talk about like how what that experience was like for you, because I also saw the video of you were out there at like 3 a.m. and passing out drinks to the line and everything else.
Yeah, man, it was wild. The week before we had we had the prom basically every weekend in the summer, and the week before, after I played, I was talking to Jamal Crawford, and he was just like, listen, bro, make sure you're here next weekend. Just make sure you're here next week. I can't say anything else, but just make sure you're here. And I'm like, I kind of heard the buzz that LeBron was coming, throughout the whole summer and things like that. But, you never know. These guys are top tier. LeBron's one of the most busiest dudes in the world. So you never know if they can actually pull up.